Thanks everybody for coming out this morning. Welcome to the University of Kansas. We are in the center of campus in the Student Union. We just moved. We moved across the street. We're at the Religious Studies building across the street from the Student Union at the University of Kansas. And we're assembled here today to talk about the future of Midwestern studies and what it should be and whether it needs to be revised. And we have five great speakers today. And I will introduce them individually, and then we will let them all speak, and then we'll have a good discussion at the end. My name is John Lauk, and I am president of the Midwestern History Association, and we have been trying to foster this dialogue about the future of the Midwest, Midwestern studies, and the history of the Midwest, and we really thank KU and the Mid-American American Studies Association for hosting us this morning. Our first speaker is Dr. Casey Hermanson. She grew up in New Zealand and earned her PhD at the University of Toronto, and she is now here in Kansas as a full professor of English at Pittsburgh State University, which is very near here. She is the author of 2 books, and she is currently working on 3 more books. But she is also the chief editor, or the editor-in-chief of the MidwestQuarterly, which is a journal published at Pittsburgh State University here in Kansas. So please, welcome Casey.
Thanks to John for putting this panel together and inviting me to speak. As will become clear in the paper, and John shouldn't panic because I do bring it around, but my first sort of response was that I felt tangential to the topic, but the more I thought and worked on it, the more apropos it seemed to be able to be here today. So my title for my contribution was Reassessing the MidwestQuarterly. We've got a brand new website and we'll change it for other speakers, but just to show you that we are open for work. We're very happy to take submissions, so please submit. My contribution here will, I hope, tie into what other panelists more directly contributing to Midwestern Studies will have to offer. While the title of PSU's journal is the MidwestQuarterly, it isn't strictly Midwest themed. That said, of course, we've often published articles on regional matters, and we see that we're a good platform for them. I'm currently planning a Midwest-themed issue for January next year, and it'll contain articles about fracking in Oklahoma, regional writer Bill Holm, and PSU's own first-year program initiatives in student retention. We need more articles, so if you have Midwestern-themed articles, please submit. Next summer, we have another special issue planned, this time dedicated to James Tate, a Pulitzer Prize-winning PSU alum who died last year. But in fact, negotiating our role in Midwestern Studies is part of what I came here today to listen to other panelists and learn about. So that's the first context. The MidwestQuarterly has been a thriving interdisciplinary journal from Pittsburgh State University since 1959. The only statement of its mission from its founding editors, an academic and a poet, was this: the MidwestQuarterly is governed by its board of editors and is not under the jurisdiction or control of any other agency, office, college, or academic department of the university. That's it as far as a guiding founding statement that we have to work with. The journal has stated its aim in the front matter, unchanged until last year, that it seeks subjects of contemporary significance that are interesting and readable, and that it doesn't aim to compete with scholarly journals. Our reader, at least our past reader, is scholarly general. In May, just last year, I was appointed the Quarterly's 4th editor-in-chief. However, I inherited 2 distinctly different journals with the role. One, a respected journal with a long tradition of publishing thought-provoking articles on contemporary thought, which is the journal's subtitle, alongside poetry. This journal is held in libraries at Brown, Harvard, Notre Dame, University of London, and other such libraries globally. It's a print journal. It's distributed online by database services such as ProQuest, EBSCOhost, and others. While it's underwritten by our university, it also contributes financially to its own upkeep. The other journal I inherited, though, in the same, was a journal in crisis. The longtime editor who retired from the journal in 2012 left a year's worth of poetry issues, which were then guest edited by a PSU creative writing professor, 2 special issues around a single author, and a small handful of other accepted articles for the next editor to use. But in the year prior to my appointment, the journal didn't publish a single one of its 4 issues. Whether the crisis was to be temporary or fatal remained to be seen. As you can imagine, that provoked a crisis at all levels. Our library subscribers were requesting missing issues that didn't yet exist. Authors were wondering when or if their articles would see print, and there were numerous authors whose submissions in the interim were in limbo. The administration at the university called several meetings to discuss the fate of the MidwestQuarterly, and I'll interject here for a moment that the statement that we weren't bound by any college department or anything caused all kinds of problems in figuring out who could fix the problem and how. As my presence on this panel today indicates, though, the university decided not to let the journal die in 2012 after its more than half-decade run. However, my mandate wasn't simply to keep up the good work, nor was it simply to come up with the 4 missing issues by the end of last summer, which we did, or to address the PR crisis and re-establish the journal's record of prompt communications, which we also did as a topmost priority. But it was also to work with the existing board to create bylaws that has in turn prompted a self-assessment of the journal's place on our campus, in print culture, in the early 21st century, and in Midwestern studies as well. There is much that has arisen from this year of self-assessment that's very exciting and I think fascinating, but which doesn't speak to the role of Midwestern studies, so I'll leave all that aside at this point. Still, the context of what we've been doing this past year and what prompted it is, I think, crucial to place what follows. Now that the journal's been given a new lease on life, what will that life look like going forward from here? And that's where I fit with the topic of this panel, should Midwestern studies be revived, now that the MidwestQuarterly has been revived, is perhaps most relevant. That's also the question that I asked the board this year in preparing the new bylaws. What's our role within the university? Has our readership changed? Does a print journal still make sense, and how? In short, the answers have been what we have already begun ways of working, the answers are that we've already begun working more openly with PSU faculty. Many had in fact all but forgotten that we existed. A campaign of flyers, magnets, and a very public presence at opening faculty meetings has begun to turn that around. But I see from my travels through the filing cabinets and preparing to come here today that we've always published PSU authors alongside others from around the globe. I have less apology to make there than I anticipated. Has our readership changed? Yes, it clearly has. The advent of online databases means that the armchair scholar, whom I believe the journal was originally aimed at, is no longer the primary reader, if they're still out there reading us at all. Instead, scholars and researchers get our articles through keyword searches as they're gathering materials on related subjects. It seems increasingly less appropriate to have our disclaimer that we don't aim to compete with scholarly journals in their field, although we still disavow foot and endnotes in the journal, which is a limiting factor. Third, does a print journal still make sense? It does, but given the online nature of the research methodology these days, the print version is more artisanal and should reflect that. To adapt, we're launching our first ever art cover this summer. You can see just a sample of, this is the very first issue and the winter issue. Winter issues have always been white, summer issues yellow, autumn that was probably a nice orange at some point and has faded in the intervening years. And spring is always green. So we've had 4 colours which have only ever changed as the shades of available cardstock from the printer have changed. But there's always those 4 seasonal colours, and that's all that we've ever had. To launch our first art cover, which is not this, by the way, but we've got the board to vote that we'll use art covers from this point forward to reflect the more artisanal print sort of nature of the journal. And we're going to distribute those free on campus from a dedicated display shelf in the main library building. In a side note though, that's led to a bit more Midwestern branding. The board rejected this potential cover, so this is not going to appear as a cover on the MidwestQuarterly. It's mocked up because we had a student class generate 40 of these for us to consider for a special issue this summer, and it was those 40 copies of artwork that allowed me to persuade the board that we should use artwork going forward. So, the board rejected, though, this potential cover generated by those students in a commercial graphics class because it didn't seem to speak to Midwestern imagery. Agree or disagree with the verdict, that was the first time that I'd heard the board indicate that they wanted us to project a Midwestern image to go with our name. So I'm using Midwest as a prompt for next semester's class to see what they come up with. And that first art prompt was for a special issue on radical thoughts, in case you think me remiss for not having gone there first. Okay, again, in preparing to come here today after less than a year in the role as editor, I took the opportunity to delve into the back of many filing cabinets for the first time to see what was there. And actually, I have to thank John for that because it's been, as you can imagine, a very busy year with 8 issues being produced and re-establishing trust and a pipeline of submissions and putting an advertisement in the Chronicle for the first time and launching a sort of a PR campaign on campus as well, sort of do consciousness raising. I genuinely didn't know what was in a lot of the filing cabinets in the office because I've been working on a need-to-know basis. And so our secretary was away on a cruise this past week, well earned. And so I kind of spent the week in the office puttering and thinking about this presentation today and randomly opening filing cabinets that I hadn't yet opened to see what on earth was in them. In a very faded folder labeled newspaper clippings, I found a page from the Wichita Morning Eagle with a review article about our journal dated June 19, 1961. The title of the article is Pittsburgh MidwestQuarterly, Intellectual Flower in the Balkans. The author praised the general interest reading and reviewed several of the articles in that issue, only one of which was squarely Midwestern, specifically on women in Kansas history by a then history professor at Pitt State, Elizabeth Cochran. Another press clipping from the Manila folder from the same year in the Sunday Eagle dedicates 5 paragraphs to another Kansas article, Kansas Reflections of a Modern Pioneer, by a scholar from Kansas Wesleyan University of Salina. What this tells me, apart from the fact that I need to contact our university archivist next week to rescue some of these materials from our filing cabinets before we move offices this summer, is that the Midwest Quarterly has a long-standing tradition of publishing Midwestern studies, alongside hundreds of Midwestern poets and their poems. When I was asked to join this panel, I wasn't sure how well I fit. My first response to John was, in fact, that apart from the location of the university that produces it and the name the Midwest Quarterly, we really weren't a Midwestern publication. I'm glad to have discovered how very wrong I was, and although I may not have given much to you in the way of food for thought, I now look forward to hearing from others in the panel and the discussion to help chart the journal's way forward from here. Thank you.